Alright, so the other day, impulse decided I was going to make an iceberg about Tomodachi Life because, for whatever reason, I've just been having a nightmarishly large obsession with Tomodachi Life, and, I got pretty good reception on it, for the most part, on most places, so I decided I might as well just do one of these because I've seen them everywhere and I am obsessed with watching different iceberg videos even for things that I have no fucking clue about. So, yeah, we're gonna do that. I'm sure most people know what an iceberg is, but if you don't, it's basically just a categorization of things based off of how obscure they are. The lower down we go onto the iceberg, the more obscure things tend to be. Anyways, I will no longer continue to hesitate and we'll just go right into this. Note that it was way more difficult for me to find things close to the bottom of the iceberg because I didn't want to fill it with filler, but also a lot of things in this game I feel like people either know about or things that I just feel generally hard to categorize, so forgive me if anything seems like it's in a weird placement. Now, without further ado, let us begin. Starting off with this iceberg, we have Miitomo. Miitomo was an app game revolving around the Mii characters, vaguely similar to Tomodachi Life that launched on March 17, 2016 and was discontinued on May 9, 2018. This was one of Nintendo's first ventures into the app market and also the first one that was closed down. The app's failure is attributed to the fact that the player numbers continued to dwindle ever since the release of the app. When it came out, it was relatively popular, but after that, it just wasn't. Tomodachi Collection is a game released for the Nintendo DS exclusively in Japan, and is also the precursor to Tomodachi Life. It was released on June 18, 2009. This game was planning to have an international release, but they could not figure out how to get the voice synthesizers to work properly in order to do so. This game set up most of the fundamentals for what would eventually become Tomodachi Collection New Life, also known as Tomodachi Life. The gay marriage controversy, also known as the Mii Equality movement, was a movement that started shortly after release of Tomodachi Life. The movement was started due to the fact that Miis could not marry Miis of the same gender. It was argued that because other similar life sims, such as The Sims, had this feature, that Tomodachi Life should also include it. A variety of news stations even reported on this. Nintendo later responded to this controversy, apologizing for the lack of LGBT representation and stating that in the future, they would include this feature in new installments. Crackship simply refers to the fact that Miis will end up in very bizarre relationships. The relationship system in Tomodachi Life is pretty random, which means that you could end up finding a lot of incredibly bizarre couples on your island. Spot Pass items were items that were received through Spot Pass. Every month or so, new Spot Pass items would release into the shops, making it so you could buy these items exclusively in those areas. After the Spot Pass support for this game was discontinued, it was almost impossible to acquire these items without trading. The compatibility tester is a feature in Tomodachi Life that allows you to basically do a horoscope between two Miis. It affects basically none of your gameplay, but it is a fun feature. Nintendo Land and Game & Wario Easter Egg refers to an Easter egg that if you give a Mii a Wii U item, you will hear these games being played in the background. Vinesauce refers to streams created by the Vinesauce channel centering around Tomodachi Life. There are around 57 episodes of this series, and all episodes are around an hour long. These streams help popularize the game to an audience that otherwise would not have cared about it. It also, to this day, remains somewhat fundamental to Vinesauce lore. Miitopia is a JRPG about the Miis that released in December 2016 in Japan and July 2017 worldwide. Although not directly related to Tomodachi Life, it is theorized that this game was inspired by Tomodachi Quest, which was a minigame you could play in Tomodachi Life. An interesting tidbit about Miitopia is you could import Miis from both Miitomo and Tomodachi Life in order to be heroes. This is the only 3DS game to do so. Mii Voice is a bit of a weird inclusion on here, because I put it on here mostly to talk about the regional differences between character voices in the game. It is incredibly easy to glitch these voices out and make them sound incredibly grating or bizarre. In all regional variants, the voice bank is completely different, with the Japanese one being the oldest and was reused directly from Tomodachi Collection. The Japan, USA, and PAL versions of the game are the three most well-known versions of this game. All three have extremely different regional differences. The official Shack Mii refers to the fact that there is an official Nintendo licensed Shack Mii that you can add to Tomodachi Life. This Mii is also a special Mii, meaning that it's completely unable to be edited. Nintendo Direct refers to the fact that there was a Nintendo Direct dedicated to Tomodachi Life. There were two Nintendo Directs, one in Europe and one in America. Both of them are completely different. Japan and Korea received trailers, but not a Direct itself. Salty DK Dan is a YouTuber who streamed Tomodachi Life relatively late into its lifespan. Although not quite as long as the Vinesauce streams, they were still relatively iconic and also introduced a new audience to the game. Non-Vinesauce streams refers to any stream that is not related to Vinesauce or Salty DK Dan specifically. Special foods are items that you can receive from traveling Miis. Special foods are completely different depending on region and are one of the hardest items you can get. When you feed a Mii a special food, they will give you a special quote to go along with that meal. Special foods are also treated differently than normal food items and do not appear in your Mii's like or dislike list. In the Japanese version, there is a location called the rooftop. In all other localized versions, this location is replaced with the tower. In the Japanese version of Tomodachi Life, it is possible for Miis to cheat on their spouses. In localized versions of this game, it is impossible for Miis to ask out married Miis. However, in the Japanese version, this is not the case, and it is also possible for that person to accept the dating proposal. Every region that this game is from has a different logo, and although that this is common for most video games, it is not really that common for the European and American logos to be that different. The European logo is more reminiscent of the original Japanese logo, whereas the American logo is completely different. Regional clothing, item, and food refers to the fact that almost all regions just have different versions of these items. Tomodachi Quest is a thing that I mentioned earlier, and it's mentioned on this list because of its connections to Miitopia. Unused/regional music refers to music in the game that is not actually in all versions of it. Although a number of this music goes completely unused, the music used in the Japanese version that is not played internationally involves music from the Love Tester, music from the Docks, and music from New Year's. The Dream Familiar is exclusive to the Japanese version and features a very brief screenshot of Tomodachi Collection's island before fading away. In the Japanese version of Tomodachi Life, it is possible for adult Miis to marry child Miis. This has changed for obvious reasons. When a Mii is sad or sick, a rain cloud will appear above their head. This is not the same in the Japanese and Korean versions, and instead shows purple swirlies. A weird fact about Tomodachi Life is the fact that its deletion screen is somewhat disturbing. It depicts a Mii gaining sentience and begging you to not delete its save file. If you do delete the save, the Mii will fade out into the background. Enka is a music genre exclusive to the Japanese version of Tomodachi Life. I'll play it here for you guys so you know what I'm talking about. Trash items and the birthday cake are the only food items in the game that you cannot acquire through the store. These items are not considered special foods. You can get trash food by giving a Mii a frying pan and having them produce something that's completely unedible. If you want the birthday cake, you have to play the game on your birthday. In the evenings, there's a bird that sounds like it's screaming "Mom" in the background. It's kind of funny, but it doesn't really mean very much. The space trip is a relatively rare event that happens if you give a Mii $100,000. It is essentially identical to giving your Mii a travel ticket, but the only difference is that your Mii goes to space. The Mii also permanently receives a spacesuit that they can wear. The non-Mii shopkeepers change regionally depending on what version you are playing. In the American version, the Miis have a wooden block head. In the European version, they have a robot head. In the Korean version, they have motorcycle helmets, and in the Japanese version, they wear Kuroko stage masks. The music that plays in the cafe is the same music that plays in Tomodachi Collection's concert hall, or at least equivalent to it. In the Japanese version of the game, the lyrics are also retained. Abandoned children result if you delete a Mii's parents. I don't actually know if it's possible to delete a Mii's parents while the child is still in the baby stage in the game, but you can definitely do it once that Mii is an adult. Backscratch is a minigame from Tomodachi Collection that is carried over to Tomodachi Life in the form of traveling Miis. If a Street Pass Mii comes to your island, you may have a chance of doing this. Back rub refers to the fact that there's an interaction with a Mii where if you turn around and rub their back, they will react to it. A lot of people don't actually know about this reaction. In the Japanese version of Tomodachi Life, when Mii sing Happy Birthday, they sing the song in English. In other versions of the game, they do not sing the lyrics and instead just hum them. This is due to the fact that this was around the time of the Happy Birthday song controversy. The edit wake up exploit is a well-known exploit in Tomodachi Life. If a Mii's asleep and you want to interact with them, go to the town hall and edit that Mii's personality and they will be awake. The Korean version of Tomodachi Life is another regional variant, but is also the least well-known. Even the Tomodachi Life wiki lacks information about it. There are a variety of region-exclusive vacation locations in Tomodachi Life. Most of these locations exist in the other games, they're just renamed. Your island address is automatically assigned to you when you create a file in Tomodachi Life. It is an unchangeable part of the game. The only instance in which you would be able to change your address is by deleting your save file. The Dying Happy creepypasta is a somewhat popular Tomodachi Life-related creepypasta about a guy named Mr. Happy making the player and all their islanders kill themselves. It's typical creepypasta territory, so it's nothing really that's all that exciting. In Tomodachi Life, there was originally going to be a piano item that you could give to your Miis. This item never ended up making it into the game, but there are remnants of the music that are left in the files. AKB48 and Mii is an idle game where you can essentially add one of your Miis as one of the members of the band. This game was never released outside of Japan and also was not very well known. This game is mostly unrelated to Tomodachi Life, but I added it to the list as it is another 3DS related Mii game. In the Japanese version of Tomodachi Life, there are a lot of really bizarre references to hanging. It's highly likely that this was unintentional, but there are multiple dreams in the game that depict Mii's hanging. These dreams include the stick figure dream and the backpack dream. Barbecue ashes refers to the fact that during the barbecue event, if you don't blow away the smoke, the Mii will just continually get harassed by the ashes until they turn gray. Multiple areas and items in the game have the word Redfort written on them, implying that it's some kind of brand. This branding also changes regionally. The beckoning animation is different between regions as well. In the Japanese version, they will beckon you, while in the American and European versions, they will just wave their arms around. I'm not actually entirely sure if the Korean version depicts this. In multiple conversations, the question as to what size the Miis are in real life comes up a lot. It is generally accepted that the Miis are just only a few inches tall. This idea is also favorable in the sense that it depicts the game as sort of like a dollhouse. There's a lot of incredibly weird cryptic dialogue that happens when you talk to Miis. I can't think of any specific examples off the top of my head, but I'll display them if I find them. If a Mii divorces when they're about to have a baby, the baby will just cease to exist entirely. Fans have often interpreted this as the equivalent to an abortion or to a miscarriage. Tomo is a fan-made Miitomo clone created in 2020. It is functionally identical to Miitomo. I imagine it is sort of the equivalent to a Club Penguin rewritten. In the Tomodachi Life Nintendo Direct for the US version, there is a scene that depicts Bill Trinan waking up from a dream and seeing Reggie Fils-Aimé, but as a Mii. Instead of just straight up being a Mii, it's a guy in a mascot costume, implying that somewhere at Nintendo there lies a Reggie Fils-Aimé mascot costume. To my knowledge, this costume has never been seen again outside of the Nintendo Direct. Unsettling fourth wall breaks is similar to cryptic dialogue, except for the fact that it's directly in reference to fourth wall breakage. I'll post some screenshots of this one as well. The bunny suit is an item exclusive to the Japanese version, which is literally just a Playboy bunny costume. This is the only blatantly sexual item in the game. In Tomodachi Life, the personality descriptions are basically just a really rudimentary version of the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Just like in real life, it essentially accounts for nothing. The Olympian Skydiver newscast happens internationally, but there are major regional differences depending on where you're playing the game from. In the news report, the Mii will fall from the sky without a parachute. In the American and European version, that Mii will fall into a net that was intended to save a kitten. But in the Japanese version, it just cuts away to a city and you can see the ground shake slightly. In the Factory Dream, in the Japanese version, you can dip Miis in white or black paint. This was changed because of potential racist implication. In the Japanese and European versions of the game, it is possible to take a trip to Germany. When Miis do take a trip to Germany, they may come back with a souvenir of a piece of the Berlin Wall. This souvenir implies that the Berlin Crisis and the Cold War happened in Tomodachi Life lore. The ritual dream is probably one of the most well-known dreams from Tomodachi Life. In this dream, Miis will typically surround a food or an item and then chant in worship of it. In the Korean version, instead they worship another Mii and dance around with ritualistic fans and outfits. This was changed due to religious implication. In Tomodachi Collection, there is a dream called Rokurokubi, or also just known as the neck extension dream to English fans. All that's depicted in the dream is a Mii whose neck you can extend. It is based off of a Japanese yokai. Fortune-telling notebook for teenage men is an early development concept for Tomodachi Collection. In this idea, it was only supposed to be about boys aged 13 to 17 until they decided to make the game into a general life sim. To my knowledge, not much else is known about this development cycle. But yeah, that's basically everything from this whole iceberg. I probably neglected to mention things that were there before, but I have basically people telling me to add stuff like that on Reddit, which I didn't have enough time to do for this video, so you're gonna have to forgive me and read some of that. But yeah, I don't know if anybody else is planning on doing a video on this, but I'm the original creator of that iceberg. Maybe someone out there will make another video about it, but more informed. We'll just have to see in the future. But anyways, thank you so much for watching this, because I do plan on making a video about Tomodachi Life's regional differences in the near future, as long as I can get my European copy of the game pretty quickly. But with that, I'll see you all till then.